Welcome back to Get Git version control with Git and GitHub, and this is part 3 of the video series workshop. So if you haven't seen the first two, you might want to jump back in the playlist and see what you missed. I'm Evan Williamson, Digital Infrastructure Librarian at University of Idaho, and so this section we're going to install and set up Git. In the last section we set up a project on GitHub, and so the next step that we want to do is be able to copy that repository down onto our local machine so we can work on it with the tools that we have on our local computer. To do that, we're going to need Git installed and set up. So this video, we're just going to do that and get you oriented to the terminal and getting everything set up and ready to go for that. So the first step is installing Git. Git is a free and open source software. The installer is pretty good. The instructions are a little bit different depending on your operating system. If you're on Linux, it'll might be installed already. It's common on many Linux distributions, but it will almost always be in your repositories. So on Ubuntu, you'll just do apt install Git and you'll have it ready to go. On Mac, you have a couple options. You can just download the installer from the Git website, or you can use this Xcode command line tools, which a lot of people are going to use already if you're using some other programming languages. So it might be something that you just want to install and get yourself set up already. To do that, if you want to use the Xcode command line tools, you'll have to open up your terminal and then use this command to get it installed. If you're on Windows, Git is actually a program written for Unix-like systems, so written really on Linux, and so it needs its own special environment on Windows to run. And so they've made a package called Git for Windows. You'll find that just on the regular Git webpage to install it or download an installer for Windows, but it is a special package that comes with Git, a tool called Git Bash, which is a terminal emulator that we're going to use today, and also Git GUI. And so Git Bash lets you use Linux-style commands and utilities on Windows. So what's great about that is that the commands are going to be the same on Windows, Mac, and Linux, because we're going to be using this Git Bash terminal. And so go ahead and I'm on a Windows computer today, so go over to the Git's website, and it'll come up with the download for your system. So you're just going to click that, download that installer, and once you have it on your local machine, I'm gonna see what I got here. I have the installer, and I'm just going to double click that to get it started. And so it's just a normal kind of Windows installer, except the license. Everything you're going to use is the defaults, and you just use all of these defaults is good. You really don't need to change anything. This is the only spot where I suggest that you change something. It says choosing the default editor used by Git, and I would suggest using this drop-down and selecting Nano Editor. Use the Nano Editor by default. And so once you do that, you're just going to go ahead and use all of the defaults that it has available there for you. And that's just going to take a minute for that installation to complete. Okay, I have a successful installation. Send me over to the release notes. I can now open the Git Bash terminal on Windows. So the first step that we need to do on all systems, on your Mac and Linux and Windows, is get a terminal up and running so that we can work on the command line. So on Mac, you can just open your Spotlight and start searching for terminal, or look in your apps and find terminal, and it's going to open up a terminal window. On Linux, same thing. It's also called terminal. And on Windows, you're going to search in your applications for Git Bash, which is the terminal emulator that is packaged with that Git that you just installed. So here's my Git Bash opened up, and I'm going to make this window a little bit bigger and zoom in a little bit. And so when you open up your terminal, you're going to find that you have a couple parts to your window. It's going to look something similar to this. So you're going to have your username, and then it's going to say at a computer name. And then in the case of Git Bash, it has this thing called Mingwin64, which is the kind of emulator that's making it think that it's a Unix terminal, even though we're here on Windows. And so a similar pattern is going to be available in the terminal on Mac and Linux as well. So the terminal is just a way to navigate around your computer and use some programs in a textual way. It was the original kind of interface to computers before we created these really cool visual interfaces that we use today in web browsers and all that. And so one thing that's worth doing is spending a little bit of time, if you're not familiar with your terminal, kind of how it works. And so just to give you a quick background on that, you can click over on this link here to the cheat sheet of command line navigation, just to give you a refresher on that if you're not familiar. We can do pwd is a command which means show the current working directory, and so that tells me where I'm at. A tip when you're using Git Bash is that you want to get back to the kind of root of your normal Windows file system. What you want to do is do cd change directory space, and we'll do a /c is that C drive that Windows considers the kind of root of the file system. And if you do a slash after that, you're going to get back to that normal kind of root of the Windows file system where all your other files start from. And so if we're in C drive on Windows, we can then switch over to our users, your username, and then documents. So that's where all your documents are. And so you can start navigating around. It's exactly the same file system that you're going to navigate with your Windows Explorer or your File Explorer in Mac. It's the same system. This isn't some magical place that this terminal is navigating around. It's the same exact space and file system that your Explorer is navigating through. And so this folder that I'm in right now, Documents, is the same one that I could view here in my File Explorer. And it has the same files and does the same things. So I can list the files by doing an ls for list. I can cd to change into one of those folders. So I'll go into the GitHub folder. I can ls to list those. If I want to make a new directory, I can do a mkdir for make directory space and just give a new folder name. So demo folder. And then if I do a ls, we can see that there's this new folder called demo folder that I just created. So that's some basic navigation in your terminal. The only thing that we need to do right now is the first time that you set up Git on a computer that you're using, and you only have to run this one time, is you're going to have to configure your most basic settings in Git. And so you're going to have to set up your username and your email, and you want those to match what you have set up on GitHub. And so you're going to go in here and you're going to use this command, which is, and it doesn't matter where you are when you do this. You can just open up a fresh terminal here, and I'll make that bigger and zoom in again. So once you have your terminal open, you're going to use this command that is listed on the outline here, and you're going to start with the application that you're working with. So git, and then we're going to do space. Config is a command that we're going to be giving to that application, which is git, and then we're going to give it a flag, which is these dashes, global. So and then we're going to give it a value that we want to change, user.name, and then you're going to enter the username that you use on GitHub. So I'm going to use Evan Will, which is my GitHub username. And then when you get to the end of that command, you're going to press enter. One thing, you can paste into your terminal. So I could just copy this with a Control-C, and normally you should be able to paste using Control-Shift-V into your terminal. If that did not work, you can go over here to your terminal window, and if you just right click on it, there's a menu and it says options, and if you go through here, you should be able to say find the option in here to be able to paste in here. So here's where those kind of options are. And so I would suggest doing that, being able to use paste. You can also should be able to right click and paste on Windows as well. And I just pasted this command in here. I don't want to run that because that would change my my username to example name. And so if it's a command that's in your terminal and you want to cancel it, do Control-C, and that will always just cancel it. It didn't run that command. It just gave me a new line to start over on. Okay, and the second thing is you're going to have to give it your email. So again, we're going to follow that same pattern. Git is the application I want to use. Config is the command that I want to give to that application. I'm going to use a flag, global, user email, and then put your email in there, the email that you use on GitHub. So it has to exactly match the email that you used on GitHub. And if you used the privacy setup to kind of hide your email, just remember to use the correct alias, because on your local machine, that's what's going to be recorded when you make your Git commits, and GitHub gives you some instructions on how to do that correctly. The last thing that that I would want to do is set up a default text editor. So when we just did that installer on Windows, the installer gave us that choice to set a default text editor. And so I don't have to do that here on Windows, but if you are on Mac or Linux, you probably will want to do this, or if you want to change it on Windows, you can change it using the command line using this command here. The default on Git is Vim, which can add it can be very, very confusing. So if you want to click on this link here to an article about how many people search for how to get out of Vim once it opens, it's a very common problem and question. And so when you are making a Git commit, as we've seen, you always have to give a commit message. And so if you end up making a commit or making a merge commit, sometimes is the most common situation where this will come up, and you don't give a message, the default editor is going to pop up and demand that you give it a message to finish that commit. And if the default editor is Vim, you might be into this odd command line program that you don't understand, and so it can be very confusing. So I would suggest setting it as Nano, which is a very simple command line editor that will be built into your terminal. So it's pretty easy to use, and to save your file on Nano is a Control X is how you will start saving your file there. So I would suggest switching your default editor to Nano, and that's really all you need to do. Get your username in there to match GitHub, get your email in there to match GitHub, set your default editor, and that's this set part of the workshop. Just get Git set up, get it installed in your system, and make sure that you're configured. The one note I want to add here is that in general, in this workshop, what we did is we went over to GitHub and set up our repository. And in the next video, we'll be cloning that repository down to our local machine. You can, however, if you want, start a repository on your local machine directly and initiate a new Git repository locally. I never ever do that, so I just wanted to make it aware that it is something that you can do if you're just going to do some version control on your local machine, or if you're setting up a repository project and then you're going to later add a remote on GitHub or some other platform. It is possible. The easier workflow, I believe, is to start on your hosting platform like GitHub and then clone that down to your machine so that the remotes are already automatically set up for you, which kind of takes a few steps out of the process. So that's the end of this video. Tune in for the next video, which will be a bit longer because we're going to start using Git. We're going to clone that repository down to our machine, and we'll go through the process of creating a commit and editing some files on our local machine. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.